In this video, we're going to take a quick look at how to mentally think about code. Now, this video is for extreme beginners, so if you're familiar with coding and you really don't need this, it's no problem, but it may help you get another perspective on how to think about code. And if you think about it this way, it's going to help you further on into your coding adventures to do more complex code, but have a visualization of it. These analogies will work further into your computational career if you choose to use it. But for right now, just understand that we're just trying to get a grasp of what the text means and maybe some sort of illustration. So here I have a simple hello world script or piece of code. It's a program. When this runs, it prints out this misspelled hello world. Now, hello, let's say, and it doesn't even say hello. In any case, the idea here is that this is a function that does something, and we're going to break all this down one piece at a time. But the reason why this is misspelled, because you can understand that you can put anything there, because this is a string. It's a string. Here's a string up here. Here's a variable, and let's break this down for a second. First, let's start here at the top, this using statement. It says using systems. What a using statement is, you could think of a using statement almost like a team of developers or a team of construction people. People who've already developed some stuff. They know how to do it. They know how to build it. They know how to run it. There's already some factories there. There's already some divisions there. They already fixed everything up for you, and it's specific. So almost like when we say using system, we're basically saying this team is considered systems, and they know how to run everything in that factory, in that place called system. If I would have said using, let's say something like IO, well, that's a different team. So I have to take this team out and a different team comes in, and they know how to do everything. They already wrote their code. They already have their cars. They already have their planes. They do everything. And all we're doing is we're asking them, well, we're actually using the stuff that they made. So anytime you're using this using statement, you're basically saying all the stuff that that team did, I want to use it, and I want it to be part of my code. And that's what this using statement does. Now, whenever you use that using statement, or you bring in a team's work, you can use it in your code. You don't have to, but you can. A separate understanding of this would be the word using. Now, imagine you need to go to the store. You could build a car, or you can use someone else's car, or you can purchase a car someone else built. You have those options. To build a car will be a lot harder to simply build a car, to simply go to the store. So it's better that you use a car. In essence, that's exactly what this does. That using statement, you have access to a lot of other things other people built. And you don't want to have to reinvent the wheel or reinvent a car when someone already invented a car that you can simply use to do the job you want to do, like go to the store or like say, hello world. And so because we are using systems this team had already built, we then start using some of their functions. And we'll talk about functions in a minute, but that's why we have access to this, because we're using someone else's system and someone else's code. Okay, so that's the using statement. Then we have the namespace. Now over here, you'll see this says namespace hello world. This namespace currently doesn't really do anything except compartmentalizes our code. So you look over here and it shows that this namespace is simply a compartment. There's a ton of other namespaces, even some we haven't even written, that will be part of our code. We can make our own namespace, and we can use other people's namespace. The thing is, the only thing you want to understand is that the namespace is simply a compartment. This code will work if I removed the namespace. It will still work. So as you continue to code, you'll understand more about namespaces and what they're meant for. But this is how you probably should think about namespaces in the beginning. So we now have an understanding of our using. We have an understanding of our namespaces. So let's look at this class here. So when we're talking about classes, we're talking about a factory. Now, a factory can do a whole bunch of stuff, and you can develop a factory to do a lot of different things depending on what you put in there, right? So depending on the machines and the people and whatever that you put in there will determine what that factory is good for. That classes are basically a factory of stuff. So that's why all of your code has to be inside of a class when you're dealing with C# or VB or so. The idea here is that a class must be used whenever you're dealing with your code. So if I was here and I started typing outside the class anything, even if I were to take this, currently this works here, but if I were to take that and put it outside the class, what's going to happen is I'm going to get an error. You see that red spot? That means error. Because it's not inside of a class, it's this whole function is outside of the class. So I can't do that. I would have to put it inside the class. So let's then look at these functions and these variables then. If I go over here, I'm looking at now a function. You're like, well, where's the function? Well, we said before that the function was inside the class, right? So that means we'd have to go inside the class and get that function out. And there's our function. So that function does stuff inside of the class or inside of the factory. And each function, you can have as many functions as you like. Each function has a purpose and a name. Some functions take in information and output information. And some functions don't take in any information. They simply output something, or they just do something. They may not even output anything. They just does something. Let's break this down a bit further. Here we're looking at two functions. Remember, here's a generic function here. But let's look at two functions. In our code, we have this main function, and it's called main. And we have this console write line function. So here, if I'm looking at the main function, whenever you're dealing with these parentheses here, anything that goes in there is the arguments that go inside the function. You see that little ball thing at the top? That's going inside the function. And this is going inside that function. So the function does some stuff. And then we notice that this function here, this console write line function, outputs HJello, right? It outputs that. Well, why does it output that? Well, because we put that inside of its arguments, and that's what the write line function does. We can have a lot of different kinds of functions, but this function specifically outputs information to the console window. Now, we notice here that we have a function main. What does that function do? That function does take in some information. So that little ball thing at the top, it takes in some arguments. And here are the arguments that it takes. And what does this function do? This function starts the application. That's all. So, but what you should realize here is that you have a function, which is that main, executing or running another function. So basically, this console write line is inside of the main function, and you can have multiple functions running other functions because that's what functions do. They simply do the job that you ask them to do. They output stuff, they take in things. It's just that simple. So if we look at this on a larger scale, we'll look at this inside of this factory. Inside of this factory, everything is an object. Okay, so inside of code, basically everything is an object. And now we have these functions here. So we have this arm function, and instead of main, we would have called this function arm, robot arm. And we can duplicate that function. Then we'll have this variable here, which is this box here. Sorry, this variable is this box here. And so we didn't really talk about the variable. Let's look at the variable really quick. Over here is a variable. That variable is a string. and it has a message there. It has some value there that we put inside of this message. Looking at that over here, this box is the variable. So that would be called message. That message takes a value, and that value is a string. So this is one way you can think about code in general. If I were to personify this part here, this right here is the value that's going in. So that, see that robot arm right there is putting that value, that string, inside of this variable. This part right here is the box, the variable. This part right here simply says what can go inside of the box. So like Fred here, he's looking in here and he knows what's supposed to go inside that box, and he knows only strings go inside that box. If I were to change that to integers, like numbers, you'll notice Fred says, oh, that's wrong, and he gives me this red alert. Strings don't go inside that box. So this would be wrong, because it would be, this box would only take integers here for the way I have it right now. So Fred would give an alert. He's looking and he says he would give an alert. So I would have to convert this to strings. So now that variable box, that's a box that only takes strings, and I give it a string, and then Fred won't give me an alert anymore. So I would have to convert that back. So I would have to convert that back to a string. And that's basically how you can think about it. And you want to test this stuff out and fool around with it. If you want, you can make a few more variables, make a few more boxes. You can even make more classes if you like. Just make sure you understand that a class is a factory, and that that factory has functions and variables.